Hi, my name is Jay Oza. I teach, mentor, and coach people on public speaking so that they can get winning high stakes speeches, whether it's one on one, in a job interview, or in front of a small group at a business or sales meeting, or before a large crowd at a conference. Today, I want to give you a sales tip. And the tip has to do with how can a salesperson listen well? Now, it sounds kind of simple, but evidently it's not, because every time I listen to a podcast or anybody that's giving out a sales tip, the number one thing they cite is that salespeople got to get good at listening to their customers. You must have heard that. But here is the problem that nobody ever talks about. To get to be a salesperson, they don't listen, they have to talk. Salespeople are bent on talking more than listening. And it's hard. You can't have a guy who gets to be a salesman because he's a good talker. Think about it. If somebody's a smooth talker, we always say, wow, that guy could be a good salesman, or that guy could be a great politician. When was the last time somebody who, just listen and say, you know, that guy could be a good salesman? Hardly ever. So now, here's the problem. Somebody who's good at talking gets to be salesperson. And then we find out that, hey, wait a second. What got you there isn't going to get you the business. Because the customers may be polite and listen to you, but then they're not going to buy from you. To give you an example, in my office here, a couple of guys from Comcast walked in, and I leave my door open. They walked in, and they tried to sell me their service. Right off the bat, I tell them, hey, I've had a terrible experience with Comcast. I had Comcast for so many years at home. I kept complaining to them, and I gave them 1 year to fix the problem, and they couldn't, or they didn't want to, or whatever. And I had to change it to another internet provider. In this case, it was Verizon, Fios. Immediately the guy said, oh, that's a consumer side, but the business side is different. And I'm like, wait a second, aren't you the same company? So that was one. And then I said, I've been pretty happy with Verizon Fios. I don't see any reason for me to change. Never understood that, didn't even pay attention to that. And he kept on asking me, like, what kind of plan do you have? What kind of this? And I agree that this may not be the world's best salespeople, but this is common. This happens all the time. The person who is selling is driven by a quota. They have to meet the quota. They're not driven by, like, I'm going to go and listen. Listening takes time. It's much easier to puke than to, listen to somebody. And how do you get past that? Like, how do you take that? Like, salesmen are aggressive. They really are like hunters. But then everybody says that the skill that they really need is ability to listen. And these are orthogonal. They're not the same. They don't really exist. But you do need that skill, right? You do need to speak up when you're asked to speak, and you do have to listen more than talk. So one thing I will suggest, that if you are a salesman or you want to be a salesman, let's face it, in a way we're all salesmen, go to a networking event and do not talk about what you do. Do not. And have some wingman or somebody with you, maybe your spouse, your girlfriend, or whoever, and or your husband in case, or boyfriend. And if you talk about yourself, they will have to interrupt and say, stop. We're not here to listen to you. We're not here to listen to you. We're here to listen to the other person. So that way, you don't do it. And you're going to have to do this a few times. You're going to have to go to like a party or a networking event, and don't bring up what you do. Even if somebody asks you, so what do? You can just say, well, I do this, but what you do is much more interesting. Something like that. So you, again, completely lower what you do, and then you can always follow up if the person gives you a card, right? So here's the thing, and I agree, and I'll tell you one thing. I'm not good at this, okay? But this is something I'm practicing, so I just wanted to share this with you. Let's say I go to a networking event, and I just went to one recently. And immediately the person asked, so what do you do? I asked, I mean, here I think it was like 50-50. I did engage the other person. And the person you engage sometimes, they just end up talking. And there's one particular guy had a company where they do negotiation, and he just couldn't stop talking. So that's another problem. That even if somebody asks you to talk briefly, boom, and then shift the attention to the other person. But one thing is, do not go into all the wonderful things you've done, like, oh, I have this customer, oh, I did this recently, oh, this. They don't care. It's not even important. And what I have a rule of thumb that every networking event, get the other person to talk, get the card, and then follow up and say, hey, by the way, I didn't get a chance to tell you about some of the things that I do, which might be of interest to you. And I ask them, look, how can I help you? So your job is to get the card or get their information on your iPhone so you can follow up. But do not, I repeat, do not tell them at the event what you do. Practice this. This is not easy. This is hard. If you can do that, attending few events or parties or whatever, social gathering, and you never bring up what you do, where you just hog the conversation and say, hey, I do this, because what I do, people are always interested, because I teach public speaking, and everybody and his brother's got an opinion on this, because they all do it. And there's, oh, you do that. And then when you tell them you write a book, they just, again, ask you, what is your book about? Oh, and then they have this opinion. And I just don't like talking too much at this networking event, because in the evening it's much easier, because I don't like to talk that much in the evening. My voice just gives out. But this is something that we all have to work on, and it is not that easy. But people always say, well, salespeople gotta listen more. But that's not in their nature to listen. Salespeople don't get to be salesmen by listening. I'll give you a perfect example of this. It's Donald Trump. I know everything rolls around this person, Donald Trump. When was the last time have you ever heard Donald Trump say, hey, by the way, what do you think? Now, he might do this in private. I have no way of knowing. That's what I hear, that in private he's so different than what you see in public. But even in public, you never seem to know whether he really cares about what other people think, whether he's even listening. He thinks he's got everything figured out, and he may. I have no way of knowing. He won, look, so you have to give him credit. He got something right. He won the most important job. So at this point, you've got to pretty much kind of defer to his judgment. But I am not sure this is going to work out in the long term. The world is very complex, and if you're talking all the time, it means you're not listening. You're not understanding what's really going on. And it remains to be seen whether he can really do that. The impression we get right now is that he just loves to talk. He loves to tell people what he wants to do, but he's not listening to what other people out there are really interested in. So that is not what you want to do. When you are at an event, you don't want to be center of attraction. Get the information from other people, and then you can follow up. And if you can practice that in a low stakes environment, then if you're in front of a client or a customer, you'll be doing that too. So it's not like you suddenly have to ask yourself, this particular client, I'm going to listen more than talk. You got to practice this all the time. Okay? So think about this. Let me know what you think. And thank you for watching, and just practice this. And eventually it'll become a habit of listening more than talking. Okay? Thank you.